In this episode of Sports Science, we're separating fact from fiction and putting sports myths to the test. We'll test one of the oldest myths in sports. Does sex before the game really affect athletic performance? To find out, heavyweight champ Chris Byrd hits the bag and the sack. Some say the hardest thing to do in sports is hit a baseball. Softball superstar Jenny Finch wants to destroy that myth. Does grunting and screaming give an athlete an extra jolt of power? We're going to get concrete results. We're using new technology to bust old barroom debates. This is Sports Science Myths. In this former airplane hangar, we created a one-of-a-kind laboratory. A high-tech facility with one purpose: to analyze the best athletes in the world. The cutting edge of science. The limits of human performance. The science at work in the games we play. This is where sports and science collide. This is Sports Science. It's a myth as old as competition. Sex can throw off your game.
There is this myth that you have to abstain from sex before a fight.
No sex.
I truly don't believe in it.
The night before the game is going to affect how I play on Sunday.
I think that that is created, that myth, to keep fighters in line.
I guess it's in my mind already, so I'll just not take the risk.
So we want to know, does having sex before you compete really decrease your performance? Or is it just a coach's ploy to enforce athlete curfews? In no sport is the sex myth more commonly accepted than in boxing. Even Rocky Balboa's trainer said that women weaken knees. So in order to answer the question, we brought in two-time heavyweight champion Chris Byrd.
For me, having sex before a match started back when I was amateur. And then even back then, I realized, well, it doesn't affect me that much. And my wife, who's with me now, she can agree with me also. She was the other part of the act.
I don't think it affects Chris at all, and I've seen that it doesn't affect him. He's always said that he thinks that it's given him a boost.
I was heavyweight champion twice, and I did it before heavyweight title fights. This is something I've always wanted to disprove. I always thought it was a myth.
Chris is going to take the kind of test none of us would have minded in high school, a sex test. Chris agreed to abstain from sex for the week leading up to our test.
Chris, thank you so much for coming in. Now, you've abstained long enough, correct?
Yes, I have. It's been hard, but I have.
So let's get to it. We're going to take your blood, run you through a whole bunch of tests, and we're going to find out once and for all.
All right, let's do it.
Let's do it.
In order to challenge the myth, Chris will undergo a battery of tests before he has sex. To test the Rocky theory that sex weakens an athlete's legs, we measure Chris's pre-sex leg strength.
Go ahead. All right.
So that's your highest score, is 1232. All right.
Chris has a pre-sex leg strength of 908 pounds of force. To test the argument that sex hurts a fighter's cardio, we put Chris on the bike.
That's your pace right there. Keep it going as hard as you can, as hard as you can.
Chris registered a peak heart rate of 180 beats per minute. To see if Chris's punching power is affected by sex, he lays the leather on a heavy bag containing impact sensors, specially designed by the U.S. Boxing Association.
Okay. Did some good hits on that one.
A pre-sex impact force from one of Chris's punches is an amazing 1,128 pounds. And finally, we test Chris's blood to measure his pre-sex testosterone level. It measures 325 nanograms per milliliter. That's right around average. If anything changes with Chris's chemistry following sex, we're going to be able to measure it. Some fellas may not kiss and tell, but science sees all.
We're gonna send you off. You and your wife, you'll go to an undisclosed location, do your thing, come back and do the same thing.
Yeah, we're gonna disprove this myth. Because I know a lot of athletes think I gotta abstain from having sex right before a match. I think it doesn't do anything.
Now the fun part of the test. Chris and his wife head to the hotel to bust a myth. We'll check back later in the show to find out if the sex myth holds up. Oh, the things we'll do for science. Coming up, we've always heard that Highlight has the fastest balls in sports. Does it really? And later, the best softball pitcher of all time comes in to break myths and our equipment. All when we return with more of Sports Science Myths. Whoa! Sports Science is back. And while boxer Chris Bird and his wife are off working some horizontal science, we're ready to take on another old sports myth. According to Guinness World Records, the fastest ball in sports is the Highlight Pelota, with a top recorded speed of 188 miles per hour. Highlight, is that true? Or just some myth cooked up by some crazy basket weaver? We want to know, does Highlight really have the fastest moving ball in sports? Here are some comparisons. The fastest Major League hit was recorded at 127 miles per hour. And the tennis serve rockets off the racket at 153. The only sport that even approaches Highlight speed is golf. Tiger Woods' gargantuan drives are routinely clocked at 180 miles per hour. That's not as fast as a Highlight ball, but it's pretty close. So we figured golf was the best bet to challenge the fastest ball myth. But we needed someone who hits the ball harder than Tiger. So we brought in 5-time world long drive champion, Jason Zuback. Of the 61 million people in the world who play golf, no one hits the ball harder and farther than Jason. His current record, 468 yards. So can he launch this 1.65-ounce missile faster than 188 miles per hour and knock Highlight off its fastest ball perch? To find out how fast the ball is traveling in flight, we have Jason hit into panes of tempered glass.
We've loaded the box with tempered glass. But tempered glass is the same stuff that is used to make a car window. It's harder than ordinary glass.
We wire up Jason with a high-tech accelerometer and fire up a state-of-the-art radar gun that would track the speed of the ball off the tee. In order to break a single pane of glass, Jason's drive will have to exceed 100 miles per hour. No problem. Smashing through the glass reduces the ball speed by 50%. Therefore, in order to maintain the 100 miles per hour necessary to break the second pane of glass, Jason's drive will have to leave his club face at 200 miles per hour. 12 miles per hour faster than the record-setting Jai-Alai Pelota. Look out, Guinness. Here comes Zubak.
One or two? Just one. Kind of had a little abrasion on the second one, but it's fairly thick tempered glass. I hit that pretty good and just got through one pane.
Off the tee, Jason's ball is clocked at 185 miles per hour, losing 50% of its velocity upon impact. It drops down to 92 miles per hour. Not enough to get through the second pane. Time for a science mulligan.
There's only one.
That was only one. I hit that pretty good, though.
Jason's second try reaches 187 miles per hour. It smashes through the first glass and ricochets off the second. Still just short of Jai-Alai. He'll need to crank it up 13 miles per hour more, and he'll break through the second pane.
Just hammer it.
Let's tee it up one more time.
Jeez. Is that it?
There we go.
Yep, he's through.
Look through there.
Yep.
The results are explosive. With one massive swing, Jason has shattered 2 panes of tempered glass and one long-held myth. The fastest moving ball in sports is no longer a highlight ball. It's a golf ball, crushed by Jason Zubak. We know Jason's ball reached at least 200 miles per hour. So how did he do it? Our Vicon House of Moves motion capture technology takes us inside the world's most powerful golf swing. It's all due to a chain of events called kinetic linking. The energy starts in Jason's feet. Jason plants himself on the ground and winds his body up like a spring. After coiling up, he begins rotating his body forward like a whip. The power multiplies as it travels up through his knees, and with the smooth twist of his hips, the energy races into the massive muscles of his core. This is what makes Jason the best in the world. A smooth, accelerating power transfer through his body. As his arms begin to rotate downwards, the club trails just behind, and the kinetic linking turns the club into a whip. This drive, the one that set the record for the fastest moving ball in sports, leaves Jason's club at a remarkable 204 miles per hour. Thanks to spectacular athletes and cutting-edge technology, we're in the business of teeing up myths and knocking them down. Looks like it's time to update the Guinness Book. Coming up, softball superstar Jennie Finch brings the heat. It's a swing and a myth. Sports Science will be right back. Some people think that hitting a baseball is the hardest thing to do in sports. Is that true? We found someone who wants to put that myth to the test. Meet Jennie Finch. Jennie is a 6-foot-tall Olympic gold medalist and NCAA Pitcher of the Year. She believes that hitting a softball is harder than hitting a baseball and is here in our lab to prove it. To start, we wanted to compare the force with which a baseball and a softball arrive at home plate. The harder it hits, the harder it is to hit.
And we have our strike force plate behind here to actually measure the load or the force that the ball generates when it impacts. Basically, all you have to do is have the pitch break through these two beams and hit that plate, and we'll be able to collect the force that's generated.
First up, baseball. Cal State Fullerton flamethrower Adam Jorgensen will see how much force his 95-mile-per-hour fastball creates. The 95-mile-per-hour fastball generates 2,411 pounds of force when it hits the strike force plate. Now, let's see if this softball generates more or less force than the baseball. Jennie's pitches will provide unprecedented data, so we can determine once and for all which contains more force, baseball or softball.
You just broke it. Look.
Coming in, they told me that I was gonna throw against some scientific gear, and my goal was to come in here and break it. And that's what we did.
Jorgensen's missiles generated an impressive 2,411 pounds of force. Jennie's first pitch broke the machine. We're going to give round one to Jennie. With her high-tech equipment smashed to bits, we decided to test baseball versus softball by bringing in a live research subject, Arizona Diamondbacks prospect, Brian Byrne. Brian hit .310 last season in the minor leagues. First, he's going to face our baseball flamethrower. Brian has no problem hitting 95-mile-per-hour baseball pitches. He's a pro. Now it's Jennie's turn, and Brian has to hit off a pitcher like none he's ever faced. And from a lot closer. Let's just hope she goes easier on him than she did on our gear. Brian's struggles are no surprise. A baseball hitter facing a pitcher standing 60 feet 6 inches away and throwing 95 miles per hour has only 395 milliseconds to react to the ball. Jenny, standing only 43 feet away and throwing 70 miles per hour, allows the hitter only 350 milliseconds to react. So a softball batter has less time to react. And that's not the only disadvantage.
We did a lot of studies on what makes it difficult to hit a pitcher, and one of the things that makes it difficult is the visual. Baseball hitters typically are used to seeing a pitch come from a certain area, so unless they've seen a lot of pitchers that come from down under, they're going to have a difficult time with that.
Our Vicon House of Moves motion capture technology allows us to break down the pitching motion of Jenny Finch in order to illustrate exactly why it's more difficult to hit a softball than a baseball. This is not a computer simulation. This is Jenny's actual pitch. The softball pitch may look casual, but it packs a punch. Jenny's shoulder is a fulcrum, and her arm a 3-foot-long lever. With massive rotational inertia, she rockets the ball over 70 miles per hour. The baseball's falling high to low path makes a last-instant swing adjustment easier. Because of gravity, a batter can quickly drop his hands and hit a descending ball. For softball, the low to high trajectory makes adjustment difficult. It's much harder for a batter to raise his hands than it is to drop them, making a rising softball pitch a unique challenge.
What did you think?
It's just different, a lot different. It was tough,
What's the biggest single difference?
I think it's just the angle. And, you know, Jenny was throwing some balls that rise.
So the myth that hitting a baseball is the hardest thing to do in all of sports? Shattered.
Oh.
Coming up,
Good morning.
Heavyweight fighter Chris Bird returns with a smile on his face. And the results of the sex test. And we'll put the scream to the test when we return on Sports Science Myths. Sports Science is back, and it's time to let the air out of a myth that has sports fans covering their ears. The scream.
We can't help but wonder why screaming or grunting works for tennis players, weightlifters, and martial artists. It seems to give them that little extra push right up to and over the edge. So what happens when a trained martial artist isn't allowed to scream?
To put the myth of screaming to the test, we brought in world champion martial artist Paul Pumphrey. Paul breaks more concrete with his bare bones than anyone else in the world. And when he breaks things, he screams. To test if screaming increases Paul's power, we set up 2 stacks for him to break. For the first stack, Paul's gonna let loose one of his signature screams. Then, for the second stack, Paul won't make a sound. He'll try to break the stack without screaming. We wire Paul up with a microstrain accelerometer to measure the speed he generates with his forearms. Load cells on the bottom of the stacks will measure how much force he generates during the 2 breaks.
For me, screaming just flushes out everything out of my system, and I'm ready to just destroy stuff.
Sensors are ready, systems armed.
Systems armed.
First up, the scream.
That's a sign of a successful break.
The fact that everything is shattered on the floor.
Somewhere in the rubbles are load cells.
There it is.
So it looks as if we have a peak on the one load cell of about 989 pounds of force, and on the other one about 1,058 pounds of force. You have about 2,000 pounds of force. That's a big number.
The 2,000 pounds of force generated by Paul's screaming break blows out the entire stack. But will he be able to generate that kind of force when he bites his tongue and doesn't scream?
So now this is the big second break. This is now the break with no scream.
Right.
Now, have you ever tried to break a stack without screaming?
Never. Now I'm worried. To mimic what I just did and to take that to the stack of concrete and not scream, it's gonna be very awkward for me.
Take away the scream. And for Paul, that could be trouble.
If I'm not able to scream and follow through this shot, all that force that I've generated is gonna be redirected back up into me, and it's gonna hurt. Effectively calling this thing, it's gonna hit back. It will. And I don't appreciate that.
It's time to hit the bricks and the mute button.
Are you psyched up for this?
I'm psyched up.
But get psyched up without actually screaming.
Stealth mode.
All right, ninja time. Medic!
Without screaming, Paul doesn't generate enough force to drive through the entire stack. The energy rebounds off the unbroken last block and bounces right back to where it came from, Paul's arms.
This whole thing broke, and on the last one, all the force just came shooting right back up.
And I can feel it in my arms.
Since Paul's not screaming, we'll let the data do the talking.
What I have here are the results from the break, okay? So he had about 2,000 pounds of force when he did the scream with it. And he only had about 1,500 pounds of force when he didn't scream.
So the myth does appear to be true, but how does it work? A power move in sports is a complex combination of physics, body chemistry, and performance psychology. A scream can enhance all three. The sudden burst of aggression triggers a shot of adrenaline and a higher heart rate, increasing blood flow to the limbs and organs. The lungs contract aggressively, forcing oxygenated blood to the extremities. As the scream suddenly releases from the body, the entire core muscle group contracts at once, linking the muscles into a unified chain of power. And perhaps most importantly, it gives the psychological boost of a battle cry, unleashing a warrior's rage on his target in a wave of pure energy. Paul generated 25% more power by screaming. If screaming worked for every athlete the way it does for Paul, 25% more power would turn a 100-mile-per-hour serve into a 125-mile-per-hour rocket. And a 400-pound clean and jerk into a 500-pound lift. So screamers, keep on screaming.
I'm very surprised with the results. I really didn't know what the results were going to be. And now I'm a believer in screaming. You ain't ever going to have me not scream anymore.
When we say hang time, we're talking about how long someone's in the air. To uncover the secrets of epic hang time, we hit the sports science basketball court and turn the ball over to high-flying NBA point guard Jordan Farmar. This 6'2" baller knows the secrets of flight.
You want to start off by getting your center of gravity as low as possible. Now, I usually use my arms to get a lot of force. You lift your center of gravity and your arms at the same time. Push off as hard as you can. When you put all that together, it's kind of like this, and you get a lot of force through your center of gravity, which keeps you going up.
Sir Isaac Newton's laws of gravity tell us that what goes up must come down. But does it come right down, or can it linger? Dr. Cindy Burr of Wayne State University and our team of scientists wire up Jordan with cutting-edge technology that will track every phase of his flight.
Jordan, these are the F-Scan pressure-sensitive insoles, and we're going to put these inside your shoes so that we can measure the pressure underneath the balls of your feet and the force that you use to jump.
Gotcha.
Second thing we want to do is we want to put what's called an accelerometer around your waist. We're going to try to measure kind of where your center of gravity is and how much it moves in space.
We're going to check this out real quick.
See,
When I move,
right?
it moves. You better buy a new screen.
Now it's time for Jordan to walk it and jump it like he talks it. Our Phantom high-speed camera does two things: make Jordan appear as though he can float and help prove that he cannot. Shooting at 1,000 frames per second, the camera records 840 frames from launch to landing. Jordan's total flight time, 0.84 seconds.
And here is your hang time.
Gotcha.
So that's the time. There's no force at all on those sensors. We know that that's the time you're in the air.
Gotcha.
Once you leave the ground, the center of gravity of your body is going to follow a perfect arc every single time. It's the same law of physics that applies to any type of projectile.
And the accelerometer data shows that Jordan's ascent and descent were exactly the same, at 0.42 seconds each way. This means that Jordan is either going up or going down. There is no in between. No point in time at which he hangs in the air. Sorry, but there is no pause button in hang time. Sir Isaac Newton's law of gravity tells us that what goes up must come down. So how do the best in the world make it look like they're hovering? Here, for the first time ever, cutting-edge motion capture tracking technology uncovers the secret behind the magic of hang time. While mid-flight body contortions cannot affect their overall flight, when elite players like Michael Jordan begin their descent, their body stretches, which keeps their head moving horizontally for an extra split second. This creates the optical illusion of prolonged hang time. Michael's hang time on this dunk is 0.92 seconds. That may not seem like a long time, but that's just about the maximum time any human could be in the air. In fact, no one can jump, land on their feet, and be in the air for more than 1 second. Now LeBron, not even Michael. The law of gravity is simply too strong. Thank you, Sir Isaac Buzzkill. On this episode of Sports Science, we're investigating some of sports' greatest myths. We're up to speed on sports' fastest ball. And Jenny Finch settled the score on which pitch is hardest to hit. There's one myth that we still haven't put to bed.
No sex.
I think it's more in the head than anything. Boxers would go a month without having any kind of relationship.
So, is it true? Does having sex before you compete affect your performance? Earlier, two-time heavyweight champion Chris Byrd and his wife Tracy shared their lifelong skepticism of the myth.
I was heavyweight champion twice. And I did it before heavyweight title fight.
I don't think it affects Chris at all. And he's always said that he thinks that it's given him a boost.
We put Chris through a series of tests to measure his strength, cardio, and testosterone levels. Then we sent Chris and his wife into the bedroom. And we waited and waited. Finally, our lab rabbits opened the hutch.
Good morning.
So we can complete our test. Let's put this sex myth to rest once and for all.
Chris, how was it?
It was great as always.
Was this a 1-round fight, 2-round?
Oh man, it was more like a 12-round brawl. For sure. I mean, I'm being honest.
So you really did put this to the test.
Yeah, I hate talking in third person, but Chris Byrd always go for the gold medal.
Always goes for the gold. Let's go ahead and run you through the same tests, and once and for all, let's put this myth to bed.
Let's do it.
Jump as high as you can. Really drive. Drop deep and drive hard. Give it everything you got. Drive hard. Drive hard.
Chris's leg strength after sex was actually higher than it was before.
I feel stronger, even more than I was yesterday.
So sex definitely does not rob an athlete of his legs.
Give me everything you got. Give me all the juice. Come on, show what you got in the tank. 1 minute down. Come on, 15 more seconds. 10 seconds. Show them what you got. Show them what you got. Show them what you got.
At a peak of 180 beats per minute, his heart rate was identical. So sex doesn't hurt your cardio.
What is it then?
It's pain.
Okay. So that was 30 seconds.
Chris's punching power actually increased from 1,128 pounds to 1,304. So after 3 of 4 tests, Chris has proven to be just as strong 4 hours after having sex as he was before. Here's how. The carbon dioxide and lactic acid released in the legs during sex is quickly reabsorbed and takes no toll on game day. Sex does put a load on our cardio system, but if you're an elite athlete, that shouldn't matter at all, especially not the next day. Looks like this sex before sports myth might be all above the belt. In our heads. But remember, Chris came in here determined to disprove the myth.
This is something I've always wanted to disprove. I always thought it was a myth.
So what if Chris deliberately gave less effort in the pre-sex tests in order to set the bar low for his post-sex return?
Now, what do you think the chances are that he sandbagged the original test?
Well, we'll find out with the blood test, because that won't lie.
Tracy's right. There's no way to rig your testosterone level. This is the ultimate barometer. And this is the moment of truth. The results are in. Chris Bird's testosterone level before sex was 325 nanograms per milliliter, and his testosterone level after sex, 462. Chris Bird, you're our hero. You've proven that having sex before sports does not hurt your performance. His levels actually went up more than 20%.
When you look at the science of it, it is truly that, a myth.
So Chris Bird proves once and for all, you can be a lover and a fighter. On this episode of Sports Science, we've analyzed some old myths in order to separate fact from fiction. If you don't keep your mind open and your eyes peeled, another myth might blow right past you. Be sure to check out every episode of Sports Science. This is where sports and science collide.
Don't put me to the test.